to really reflect on my digital habits, my personal habits, the values I had in my life. And we need to understand our paradigm of technology because our tech beliefs will ultimately inform our tech behaviors. He said, actually, your 30s are actually part of the hardest time for guys because you typically are, you're going up the career ladder, so work's busy. You might be paying off a mortgage by then. You certainly often have kids, or the pressures add up, and it's not a neutral medium. It's not like a hammer which you add to your life and you can use it and then put it down. Technology is organic, and the more you use it, the more it changes your brain, and essentially it's a loss of the inner life. I'm so confused about how to raise my kids, and they're addicted to their screens, or I see that they're going to be addicted, and I know that they need the technologies, but at the same time, I see how bad it is for them. Do you have any advice? Examine your own habits before you start to examine your kids' habits.
Well, welcome everyone to the Evolving Man podcast. I'm the founder of The Awakened Man and your host today, Alan Duonso. How much time do we spend with our heads down, letting the world pass us by? You know what? Probably more than we'd care to count. And the challenge is that as these things that are truly important are going by us, we're not creating any space that allow us to really take a look at what's important for us. And at times, it could cost a very high price. But there is a cure, and today we're going to uncover what that is and what it looks like. But before we get into all that, I just want to remind you to hit like, subscribe, and share on your favorite platform so you can stay updated with our latest content, as well as helping me grow the Awakened Man message. And for that, I'm truly grateful. With all that said, let's get on with today's episode.
Today's man knows who he is, where he stands, and what he aspires to become. Solid in his convictions, owner of his destiny, ever evolving into husbands and fathers our wives and children expect and deserve. We are the masters of our life and the leaders of our homes and community. Welcome to the movement. Stay strong, my brother.
As customary, I always like to start off by asking a couple of questions to allow us to set the stage for today's discussion. So let's go back to that first question I mentioned. How much time do you really spend every day with your head down, buried in your phone, or sitting on a digital media platform? And has this unconscious digital time cost you anything yet? Now listen, if either of these questions are making you uneasy, great. Because today my guest is going to share his ideas and strategies, how to create space in a world that truly matters for yourself. So allow me to introduce Daniel C. Daniel is a co-founder of Spacemakers, a productivity and consulting group for busy leaders. His book, Spacemaker, on how to unplug, unwind, and think clearly in a digital age, has won the Australian Business Books Award in 2021 for the best personal development book. And as a trainer, coach, and keynote speaker, Daniel has worked with CEOs, executives, and other senior professionals throughout Australia and beyond. His broad professional history includes his leadership roles in physiotherapy, health management, project management, and Christian ministry. He's also the founder of several globally accessible productivity courses such as Email Ninja, List Assassin, Priority Samurai, with more than 15,000 students online and offline. Daniel lives in Tasmania, Australia with his wife, Kylie, and their 3 children, Naomi, Caleb, and Jethro. He keeps 14 purebred chickens who eat a whole lot of grain and lay way too few eggs. Sounds like they need some productivity work. It's great to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
I'm really great. Thanks for having me, Alan.
Daniel, it's so great to have you here. I was really excited about your content and getting into today's discussion. So as you know, I do a lot of men's work, and in my men's work, we always talk about getting on your own personal hero's quest or your hero's journey. Now I know you probably have one, and so wouldn't mind you sharing what your journey's been like and how you got to doing what you're doing today.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I mean, I'm in my 40s, so I've probably had a few hero journeys and times where I've been really low and times where I feel like I've been thriving. But maybe if I think of one that's relevant to making space in the digital age, I used to be, as you mentioned, a physiotherapist, and then I started to train and equip other people in how to just do things like get their inbox to zero and organize themselves. I wish I could have productivity tools for my chickens, like you mentioned. But I ended up starting a bit of a hobby business just for fun, which was training people in email, and that became a real business over time. And I was also volunteering and helping with a church transition with my local church community. And so I found myself with 3 jobs essentially, and I had young kids, and I was building a house. A typical kind of go-getter type person in my mid-20s, or nearly it was my 30s actually, early 30s. And I just started to experience a whole lot of breathing issues, and I found myself struggling with breathlessness when I was working, and then speaking, and then I was breathless just sitting at the dinner table, and then breathless just even reading books with my young kids. And so I was getting more concerned about that, and I didn't think I felt too tired or worried, but I did all the tests, and the doctor said, no, this is stress. These are symptoms of overwork and under self-care, I suppose, not caring for myself. And that really threw me into a process, I suppose, of having to leave the comfort of the life I had and realize I couldn't do everything. I certainly can't do 3 jobs. And I made some hard decisions over that year, and my breathlessness and anxiety got worse. And eventually, I ended up making some hard decisions to simplify my life, but also to really reflect on my digital habits, my personal habits, the values I had in my life, and the time I would spend with kids and with exercise and just the value I put on work. So and I gained help through that. I had a mentor and coach who helped me with patterns and rhythms, and I ended up doing business and some church work, and but just radically changing the way I lived and worked. And that was a really important journey for me, and probably the genesis of where I started to look at the idea of predictable patterns in a book.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true. I think so many of us get to that point in life where the actions that we take, and we're trying to be productive, we're trying to take care of our families and do the right things. And at some point we get to that breaking point. And it's so great to hear that you were able to start to do the work. And that's really what's important, right? Is that we recognize that, especially as men, because we are probably the worst at calling our doctor, getting things looked after. Like, we will wait to the 11th hour. The couch will be burning before we will actually get off of it to admit there's a fire going on,
Absolutely.
And
I remember my doctor saying, it was really encouraging. He said, actually, your 30s are actually part of the hardest time for guys, because you typically are, you're going up the career ladder. So work's busy. You might be paying off a mortgage by then. You certainly often have kids, or, this is not for everyone, but the pressures add up. And so it was encouraging to realize, actually, this isn't forever as well. And to care for myself in a particular way during those stressful years as I moved into, the later years of my life.
Yeah. And so true. And figuring that out in your 30s, as opposed to your 50s, when then we become susceptible to heart attacks and other things because we've gone too long and we haven't done what we needed to do. It's so true. Because, I think back, I'm 55 now. So in my 30s, absolutely, right. There was, new home, children, new career, really productive. And that's when we tend to find that where we can really, whether we're going to make or break ourselves as individuals, right? So tell me a little bit about why you wrote the book about making space in a digital age.
Yeah. So look, I wrote a blog post about why I turn off my phone for a full day once a week on a digital Sabbath. Okay. And I wrote that 7 years ago, well before, we had a pandemic and everyone lived their life online. And that was simply because I started to recognize how much work and technology were intersected. And if I wanted to really have a day off, I needed to get away from email and get away from some of the tools that actually drew my mind as well as my habits into that kind of workspace. Anyway, that post was super popular, and I had lots of interviews from radio, and everyone's like, wow, what a crazy idea, turning off your phone. Nowadays everyone's talking about this, but I just realized there's something in this. And so I thought I'd do a 20-page ebook and write the habits and practices that I learned over the few years after burnout and that I'd refined over years, and but I found that coaching leaders and going through these habits, it wasn't enough. It's really easy to say to you, hey, turn off your phone for a day a week, and like, but that's like, whoa, that is crazy stuff. Like the world will fall apart if I did that. So there's something about the idea of unplugging that isn't hard conceptually. And we could even logically see the benefits of investing our time in relationships or exercise or hobbies, or crafts that aren't online. But there's something in the human heart, there's something that connects with our loves and longings and how we have a relationship with technology that is undefined and hard to explain, that makes it hard to do the simple things that are good for us. And so I wrote the book realizing that we actually need a much deeper understanding of our relationship with the online world. We need to understand our paradigm of technology because our tech beliefs will ultimately inform our tech behaviors. And unless we can really grasp and understand the reality of digital overuse and how it shapes our mind and our heart, well, then we won't simply be able to turn off the phone, and not check it on the loo or, those simple practices. And so the book goes from the paradigm to the principles that help you live well, and then the practices. And really that's what I've seen as a kind of a cure, I suppose, for the negative effects of digital overuse.
Yeah, for sure. I really like that idea about our tech beliefs versus our beliefs of those. And I'm curious, as you were writing the book, what were some of your tech beliefs and some of the tech beliefs that you found from doing any interviews or anything else in preparing the book?
Absolutely. So look, I mean, I've looked at it from a pretty broad perspective. What I didn't do is go into the stuff that you see a lot in, for example, Cal Newport's work on digital minimalism and some of the stuff you're seeing with the social dilemma. Like we all know now that the technologies themselves are designed to make us addicted. And so there's clearly that side. And I have mentioned that, but I think we all know that the tech is not helpful. I wanted to look at it at a broader level. So I looked at the philosophy of technology, how technology is actually embedded with ideas and that those ideas shape us over time. And we need to understand what those ideas are. It's not a neutral medium. It's not like a hammer which you add to your life and you can use it and then put it down. Technology is organic, and the more you use it, the more it changes your brain and your habits and your thinking. And so therefore it becomes interconnected. It's more like we become cyborgs rather than use the tools independently of ourselves. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah. And so then I looked at neuroplasticity, again, with a physiotherapy and health background, and how the idea that, if we were to practice the piano, for example, 1 or 2 hours a day, we would be pretty amazing at it after 20 years. But because our brain changes, I used to be able to play a concerto on the piano without even looking at notes. And I can't even play like chopsticks now because I haven't played for 20 years. So the brain changed and then it changed again. That's called neuroplasticity. But we're practicing the internet 9 to 12 hours a day as a culture. And how much, like it is a practice, just like practicing instrument or practicing craft. We're practicing swiping and typing and using our screens for 9 to 12 hours a day. And that has a significant impact on our brain chemistry. And I talk about digital power. I talk about the stories of culture. So freedom and choice, and how the idea of wanting that unlimited freedom means unlimited tech use. And I challenge that. And then finally, I talk about the loves and longings of our heart and how we can actually love through our phones, and we need to recognize those loves by disconnecting. So it's a pretty broad look at the paradigm. There's no one simple angle, but I think if you start to understand our relationship at a deep level, it gives you the impetus to then make the practical changes that are simple and actually quite life-changing.
Yeah.
Long answer. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's outstanding. I just made a couple of notes there. One was, when you talked about, the finding love through our technology and through that, and how we have substituted people, flesh and blood through technology. And even though we're doing this podcast and we're on Zoom and we're seeing each other, it's still different than it is if we were in person. the energy is still there, but I think it's at a different level. So then it made me think about, well, I totally I relate to that. And then now that Facebook's pivoting and turning into this Meta organization, and virtual reality is becoming more and more popular. I know in Canada here, we're seeing lots of virtual reality studios coming up. And I'm just wondering how much of that is going to really change the influence, because you talked about this neuroplasticity and how more of that type of technology is going to be a challenge for us in the future, that we're really going to be embedded in this if we're not careful, and especially if we're raising children, to be mindful of how that type of technology can be insidious into their growth and their development. And wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, look, the tech question with kids is a big one. I mean, I actually run digital parenting courses now, not so much for a business thing, just as a way of contributing to the community locally.
Yeah.
And it came out of the idea that every time I spoke on tech for adults, because my jam is productivity, I'm here to help leaders and managers to be more productive, be happier and healthier. And I might talk about the relationship between tech and productivity later on and how that works. I think that's really important. But people kept coming to me and saying, hey, do you do this for my kids? Because I'm so confused about how to raise my kids, and they're addicted to their screens, or I see that they're going to be addicted, and I know that they need the technologies, but at the same time, I see how bad it is for them. Do you have any advice? And I mean, when I start my digital parenting courses, I spend the first hour basically saying, examine your own habits before you start to examine your kids' habits. Because there's this block that we have, if we're constantly on our phone and ignoring our kids, and then we say to them, stop being on Instagram, well, the message isn't going to go through. So we have to start with ourselves. But then obviously there are some very specific things around girls and teenage girls and social media and mental health, guys and online pornography. I mean, I know that it crosses genders, but as a broad looking at the research at a broad level, there are particular pain points for different genders, and just that the whole online experience. When do you give your kids a phone, and how might you raise them with digital awareness, with digital limits? That they're huge questions for parents, and I think it's important that people get the education and support they need.
100%. I like the idea, what you're talking about. It truly is about, they will do what we do before they'll do what we say. And are we modeling what we want on our children to learn? So I think that's a really a great comment. So tell me, help us understand why our productivity is going to suffer if we overuse the digital technology.
Yeah. So, I mean, I love tech, obviously. I'm going to start with that. And any negative aspects of technology is on the basis of the assumption that I'm using it all the time, you're using it all the time. It's allowing us to talk from around the world. I mean, it's incredible. But it's interesting, because when I looked at the question, how does tech and productivity relate? What I realized is culture tends to tell us one story, that more technology will make you more productive. It's almost like a graph. If you imagine graphing productivity against technology, and it's linear, and it's just more tech, better life. And that's clearly not true. And we can feel that that's not true. But at the same time, it is true, because we need technology to live well and to thrive. So what's the relationship? So looking at the research, you do need tech to be productive. So imagine that linear graph is true, but then there comes a point where you plateau. You get another screen, you spend more time online, and actually, rather than being productive, you just reach the productive middle, and more is not more. But then interestingly, if you continue using more tech, if you wake up first thing in the morning and last thing at night reaching for your phone, you're scanning it on the loo, you use it for entertainment and for rest and for work and for parenting. If you're practicing the internet 9 to 12 hours a day, what you find is that you actually slide the opposite way. So you end up with this upside down U, and you end up working harder, being busier, using more technology, and actually being less productive, and actually less happy, and less healthy from the research as well. Mm-hmm. We're living less, we're not living longer. Our mental health is suffering. Our anxiety is going up. We're doing more and feeling like we're achieving less. So all of these are symptoms of digital overuse. And you see it really strongly in the research in iGen, which is like the younger generation that have grown up on tech completely. And you see the terrible mental health stats in that generation, which are increasingly linked with digital overuse. But what we're seeing post-COVID is all of our culture has shifted to the right-hand side of that inverted U curve. And what used to be normal is not normal anymore. And so we're using tech more and more, and we're all starting to feel this sense of not just Zoom fatigue, but tech fatigue. And those organic changes are starting to play out, and we're losing our capacity to be still, to be silent, to maybe pray or meditate, to have a conversation without a device, to focus for a long period of time without wanting to check a notification, just to enjoy the outdoors or look at a tree and just wonder at the simplicity or beauty of, the leaves moving. I mean, there's a loss of peace and calm, and essentially it's a loss of the inner life. Yeah. So, I mean, Elon Musk says we've all become cyborgs. We should get over it. And I think it's true. We are cyborgs, and there's some beautiful things. Darth Vader was pretty cool and he could do some cool stuff, but he wasn't probably great at relationships or silence and solitude or the spiritual life. So I think it's more, I'm saying that tongue in cheek, obviously, but we can be like Darth Vader, but let's unplug and broaden the scorecard of our life and experience habits and practices that traditionally and statistically make us happier and healthier, not just time online.
Oh, I love that. That is outstanding. And I think that's a great point that we want to make, really want to make clear here, is that we're not talking, today's conversation, not about beating down on tech and saying that it's a bad thing, because you're absolutely right. We need technology to allow us to be productive and to live life. The question is that at what point in your research and your discoveries find that there is a point of oversaturation and it isn't serving us anymore, and it's actually doing more harm than good. And that's really about the edge that we're talking about, and that edge of that piece. Can we dial it back a bit? And I really like that you're speaking about the spiritual aspect of it that is being lost in our lives, because we are so focused in technology and that we're not spending enough time in what's important. And I think about, we do, I have a meditation practice, and, come to think of it, every day, it's the phone, with some earbuds, and I'm listening to something, and I could do that just as well without the phone, without a YouTube video, without something, and just being quiet and doing and having my practice without technology. And so it's a great, simple little things like that is what you're getting at, is about really reclaiming that piece of that inner peace within ourselves and who we are as individuals. So I think that's
absolutely.
So
yeah. So I think productivity has changed. I think we still need to work on that left-hand side of the curve, where we need to improve our tech skills and tech knowledge. And like you said, as new things occur, like, AI and I forgot the technologies you mentioned, but, as they increase, we're going to need to continue to upskill, but we also need to learn to unplug on a regular habitual basis and to de-tech ourselves as a strategy and as a habit. So that's about returning from the right-hand side to the middle. And we need to be working on both skill sets at the same time. The habits of pace, which are learning tech, the habits of space, which are about unlearning tech. And this is a new world. And I think we just haven't quite grasped the importance of working on both sides of that curve to be who we are spiritually, relationally, and productively.
Yeah, absolutely. So you started talking a little earlier, but about neuroplasticity and how our brains are shaped by our digital universe, right? Especially when we're overusing it. And so what are you finding is that's happening to it? Is it, and we know that it is addictive, but what are you truly finding about the changes that are happening in our neural networks that's really causing us issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is just to recognize that the brain does change with habitual activity. So what we habitually do, we become essentially. James Clear says we are the product of the 100,000 habitual choices. And so therefore, I'm just a real fan of awareness. I'm sure that men's health and change occurs by being aware and being willing to experience your emotions and your feelings, and being willing to look at your patterns of thinking that change your behavior. But I think we need to do this digitally. It's helpful to look at what are the patterns that shape me. What's the digital liturgy of my life? Do I wake up and grab my phone and then check it? I don't know, check my email before I'm even in the shower, and do I have a relationship with my phone before I have a relationship with my kids? And like, they're the negative aspects, but what are the positive aspects as well? Like, how do I use email or social media or different platforms and apps? How are they helping me and helping me achieve my goals? I just think we need to almost audit our lives for a week, and the behaviors that we habitually do will actually give us a sense of what the neuroplasticity is, or what's happening at a brain level. So I almost think you can work out you can, of course, you can MRI the brain and realize that I think it's the anterior circular cortex is changing because of our digital internet practice, but that's not going to help the average person very much. So it's probably more helpful just to look at your actual habits and think, where are they useful? And that's going to do good things for my brain. Where is it not useful? But it's not just about the content of what you look at. It's actually about the time and patterns of swiping and using your screen that are shifting your behaviors.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Yeah, that's absolutely. Thanks for clarifying that as well. And you're absolutely right. It's the simplicity of our habits. Like, when you're the week audit, I really like that idea as well, is to get a sense, and what are we doing from the moment we get up to the moment we go to bed, and how we're engaging ourselves in technology, and is the technology overtaking at times when we could be more present, whether that be with our family, our children, or at work and working with a coworker and helping somebody, trying to be productive and being in a place that we're using technology for in the right way, as opposed to having it become a crutch and make it dependent upon how our whole lives are situated. So we talked a little bit about social media. So I just wanted to get your perspective on it. Is social media good or bad? And then how does it really affect our ability to really dive in and have some deep relationships with people?
Yeah, it's a nuanced question. It's not good, it's not bad, but there are certainly ways in which overuse is killing us. I like to frame it in a different way. Is it not so much starting with social media, but starting with what really works? And I remember hearing that banks don't spend a lot of time teaching bank tellers what counterfeit money looks like. They just help them really, really understand what real money looks like, every texture, every aspect of it. And when they see something that's not that, they pick it up pretty quickly. Does that make sense? And so I think we need to look at community, because essentially the promise of social media is that you're going to have relationships and community and experience that deep draw card of that well of relationships and life together that we so desire, and that's so hard to grasp in the individualized West with our lifestyles the way they are. And if you look at real communities, so life on life relationships, the research is absolutely tremendous. There's very strong, very large longitudinal research that says people who have regular relationships with people in their lives, who have broad social networks and invest in face-to-face community, they live a lot longer. They are happier, they're healthier. In fact, a lady, Susan Pinker, once said, she's a neuroscientist who studies community. She said, based on the research, that neglecting to keep in close contact with people who are important to you is at least as dangerous to your health as a pack-a-day cigarette habit, hypertension, or obesity. So the research says it's better to give up, to keep smoking and have relationships than to be isolated socially and give up smoking. Like, that's crazy stuff. I'm not saying you should smoke, but the research is tremendous. And so we need to realize that we are wired to be with people. I mean, it's no surprise. We grew up in tribes. We need warm-bodied, face-to-face relationships. Talking with you on Zoom's great, but there's no oxytocin. There's no that kind of relational drug. There's no warmth. The body language changes. It just doesn't replace in-person relationship. So really what I want to say is, let us honor, value, and never trade having a coffee with someone in person, or kicking a football, or, actually, patting someone on the back after you've achieved, I don't know, you've fixed a car. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that stuff is absolutely priceless. There's even research that says people with cancer, they have genes that modulate and turn on and fight the cancer when they're in the presence of loved ones, and they don't happen when they're not in the presence of loved ones. Like, that stuff's amazing. And none of that happens with social media. So social media is a fake version of community. It absolutely does not replace the benefits that we see in the research of actually in-person relationships. And what we're doing is we're trading in-person relationships for time on Instagram. So we're swapping it. And that's why we're seeing the terrible mental health outcomes in young people. And so it's actually quite likely, even based on Facebook's own internal research, that that Instagram and Facebook are actually bad for your health. They make you lonelier. They make you sadder. You feel more isolated. You have the fear of missing out. All these kind of social things happen when you see beautiful pictures of your friends filtered constantly. But even if we take the bad side of that aside, if we trade like 10 hours a week of real face-to-face relationships and spend those 10 hours on Instagram, even if Instagram wasn't bad for you, you're still lost out, because you've basically missed out on the thing that makes humans happy. And we shouldn't do that. We need to really value community once more and orientate our lives around it. And the book talks about how to do that through predictable patterns.
Right on. I really like your idea about having us be consciously aware of what our definition of community is and relationship. And I think when we do that, we will find pretty quickly, make a broad statement here, and we'll find pretty quickly that what we consider to be community today, I have 10,000 followers on Facebook, that's my community. That's not your community. The community are the three people that sit with you in your backyard, enjoying an evening, and maybe there's a fire going on. It's the things that are important that, like you said, it's that exchange of personal energy in a physical environment. And it's like, that is a great tip. And that's the next thing I wanted to really ask is, we've given a couple already, talk about doing a digital Sabbath day to help us, disconnect from our devices. And what else would you recommend would be ways that we could help disconnect from our devices?
Yeah. So I talk about a bunch of practices, and I look at them using the productivity lens of the perspectives, an annual perspective. So what are the rhythms that you do annually, like booking holidays before you book your work? So I'm a big believer that if you start off at the beginning of the year and you prioritize your rest, so you'll book your annual leave and work out how it will be truly restful before anything enters your calendar, well, then you're putting that before work. That is one of those patterns. So there's annual patterns. There's weekly patterns, like I mentioned, turning off the phone. And that is without a doubt the hardest of all the practices. And I spend quite a lot of time in the book showing you how you might even go about that, because it's not simple to even plan that. But there's some really great ways to do that. And then there's daily practices, and they're probably the easiest on a podcast, just to shoot a few ideas. So I love, and this sounds pretty simple, but I love the digital free meal. A lot of us do that, but a lot of us don't. I'm amazed. I was talking to a group of 20-year-old leaders and managers in a global company the other day, and I talked about the research that says if you eat together without a phone around a table every day as a family, for example, a 12-year-old girl in the research, by the time she's 17 or 18, will be statistically less likely to be pregnant, to be addicted to drugs. She'll have higher college entrance scores. She will be happier mentally and healthier physically, just from having a meal with her family without a phone once a night. Young kids, their numeracy and literacy goes up. So like the research is tremendous. It's such a simple habit. But this group of 20-year-olds, I was amazed. One girl said, we have just started eating at a table together as flatmates once a week on a Wednesday. We do it with our phones, but wow, it's like we're in the 1960s. And everyone agreed. And I'm like, wow, none of you have ever eaten around a table. And so I grew up differently, but the idea of reclaiming the family meal is tremendous, and it will make your kids smarter, happier, reduce their debt, give them better college entrance scores. You don't have to do anything other than eat. In fact, the research says you can feed them takeout. I don't know, you can feed them cheap pizza from Woolworths or from the supermarket in Canada,
Yeah.
and that will give the same research-based outcomes as if you kind of cooked organic broccolini. It's about community without a screen. And so, have a digital-free meal. There's a simple start if you don't already do it. No tech, don't watch TV, and talk. And if you don't know how to talk, I mean, and I really mean this, like it could be hard to start. I give a few questions in the book that can be good to help you learn to eat together. So one is, what's your high-low buffalo? So what's your high for the day? What's your low point for the day? And what's a buffalo? Some random or strange or interesting event that just makes life curious. And you'll easily get through a whole meal just having asked that question. Kids love it, adults like it. And it helps you reflect on your day and learn to reflect on the meaning of the data in your day. Do that, and you've made some space from the technological world, and you've got a huge win.
Oh, that's outstanding. I love that. I've never heard of the high-low buffalo. And look, there's a great way to use technology to go figure out, well, I'm not sure what to talk about. Well, you can quite easily do a search to find out what great conversation starters for families or whatever group. And if you need it printed beside you to get started, why not? The point is that, you're practicing different types of habits, and it's about building that new resilience to pivot us away from time to time from our digital devices. So I love that. So listen, we talked about a few things, quite a bit of stuff here today. And I'm sure we probably left something off the table. I'm just wondering if there was one thing that you could recommend for our listeners that they could be as a takeaway that you'd like them to truly remember. What would that be?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think my assumption is that we're online almost all the time. And my assumption is that as, in a post-COVID world, we're just going to keep using technology more and more, and it will improve our lives. It'll expand our horizons and give us opportunities we couldn't possibly have if we didn't have tech. So my assumption is we're online, and but if we are going to experience a world that's not online, it now has to be intentional. It has to be planned. It needs to be part of our thinking and our patterns and processes. And there is something incredibly beautiful about a life that is not digital, where you can sit in silence, where you can have an inside out life, where you can know who you are and meditate and pray and reflect and relate to people and maybe just sit and enjoy your own thoughts and not find that a terrifying experience because you've had the time to examine your life. And so the painful stuff in your life isn't just always painful. All that stuff is so important, and we're starting to lose it by always being online. And so it's really just about making space to think and breathe and be our best selves in and around digital living. And if I can encourage people to do a bit more of that, I'm really joyful about that.
Right on. That's outstanding. Well, I want to thank you, Daniel, for spending time with me today. It's so easy for us to get caught up in this digital landscape. And today you shared some great ideas. We got a couple of tactics and strategies for unplugging and reconnecting to what truly matters in our lives. And so how would our guests get a hold of you and get involved in any of your programs and reach you?
Yeah, so I'm at spacemakers.com.au. If you look up my website, feel free to contact me. We have a number of productivity courses. I have a North American trainer from Canada, actually. Nice. So we run training in Canada and the States, obviously in Australia. I run Email Ninja, so how to get your inbox to zero each day. We have other courses like List Assassin and Priority Samurai. Feel free to look up those crazy named courses. We also run a course called Making Space, which is about digital wellness and how do you do the things we're talking about, reframe your relationship with the online world and invest in your teams and their mental health and their happiness so that post-COVID, we can actually recover a healthy way of living. So we run that course online as well. So yeah, if you're interested, feel free to download parts of the book or just read my blog or connect. I'd love to hear from you.
Outstanding. Well, I'll make sure that we put all that information in the show notes to be able to capture that and get a hold of Daniel, participate in any of his work. He doing some phenomenal work and helping us really, truly regain and reclaim what's important in our lives. So thank you so much, Daniel, for being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I love your show and I love your work. So thanks, Alan.
Right on. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to the Evolving Man podcast. Are you ready to own your destiny? To become more the man you are destined to be? Join the brotherhood that is The Awakened Man at theawakenedman.net and start forging a new destiny today.